Zoom's apparently. That worked, brilliant. Zoom's apparently updated, and it's got a whole sort of new interface. So I might be a bit slower at working the buttons today, but you know, we'll see how it goes. So welcome back everyone to another eRequesting technical design group meeting. I missed the last one, but I did watch the recording. So I thought that was pretty good. It had a whole number of good discussions around actors, and also starting to socialize things around the MHR withdrawal of consent and the urgent communication. We're not going to continue talking about those today. That's not the plan yet. I think we'll be coming back to those items. But today we're kicking off with what we always do, which is our usual business, approval of minutes and updates on actions and any other updates that are coming through. And we'll also go through the additional features prioritization and updates to design principles. I think there have been updates to both of those. And Eddie will go through those. And then what was tabled for today is to actually start going through specimen and to go through what was in the original sort of data model mappings that have been out there for comment, and what's in the scaffold branch, walk through the proposal. And we also want to get to making some decisions and voting today. So that's the aim. So let's go through specimen, and let's make some decisions on what we're actually going to have as our first cut of the R1 information around specimen. And then we're going to talk about, what's in our next meeting. I think if we have space, we'll see how we go with the specimen discussion, that we can circle back to some of the other discussions or go forwards with any topics that people want to raise. So we'll go on to our usual business. So there are two minutes up for approval. There's one from April that's been put out for review, and there's also last week's. And so we're going to handle those individually. So this first one from April, let me just click through to that. So that's ready for approval. All the feedback now has been incorporated. That has all of that content. I know we're asking you to sort of cast your minds back to last month at this point. But unless people want some more time or have additional feedback than what has already been provided, these are ready for approval. So I'll ask if someone wants to motion to approve the 30th of April meeting minutes.
I'll motion it, Danielle. Angus.
Thanks, Angus. And would someone like to second approval of those minutes?
I'll second, Danielle.
Thanks, Stuart. So I'll just kick off that poll for approval of the minutes if I find the button. The new button. Here we go. Where is it? Launch. All right, you should see that now coming through. Please select whether you approve the minutes from April. If you can remember that far back and you were there, please approve. Or select for negative or abstain. If you weren't there, then you can abstain. Just checking, can anyone see that? Has that come through?
Yeah, it came through to me. Yeah.
All right. Because unlike normal, I'm not getting an update of anyone actually participating. If you've selected...
I think I'm seeing it, Danielle.
Are you? Oh, I think you're host then, not me.
I think I'm just co-host.
Huh, how strange.
But I'm seeing it. It's currently 15 affirmative, 18 abstain, 89% complete.
All right then. We'll just give that another 5 seconds and then we'll end the poll, and then I'm going to click share results, and hopefully you will all see the results. If not, Chris can read them out.
Yeah, I can see them.
I can't. That's fascinating.
Why would you need to see them?
I know. All right, more to do with the new update of Zoom then, I guess. Okay, so we've just approved that. We've just approved that one. So that was the 30th, and there's the next one, which was just last week's minutes. I think these will put out for review. So these are here. Does anyone need more time to go through and review these minutes? I'll just scan through. So that's what they look like. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone put up their hand. So in that case, I'll ask, does someone want a motion to approve this set of minutes then, the ones from last Tuesday?
I'll motion.
Thanks, Stuart. Does anyone want to second that?
I'll second it. I've just been power reading them.
Okay. I'll just give you another 10 seconds, you second. Okay. And so in that case, I'll relaunch the poll. This one is just for these meeting minutes now. So again, I assume you can see that and you're going through and completing it. Chris, please let me know when that looks like people have filled that out, and I'll end the poll and share the results.
We have 32 of 41, 78%.
All right, just a couple more people then to pop in whether they're voting affirmative, negative, or abstain. If you weren't at last Tuesday's meeting, please select that option. All right, I'm going to end the poll then. Okay, I'll share the results. Could you read those out for my benefit, Chris?
Yes, so the first one was 34 people voted out of 34 available, 47% affirmative, 53% abstained. So that's 16 for and 18 abstained. Of the
Great.
second poll, 35 of 41 people voted. There were 15 affirmative and 20 abstained.
Okay, both those motions have passed.
Why-
Thanks, everyone.
Why do those numbers don't line up with the dialogue I see? So,
I think if you're not the host, you only get to see percentage. You don't get
yeah,
to see
no,
the
okay,
exact
yeah.
numbers.
Sorry,
For
I
some
am
reason, Zoom is
Yep,
a
I'm
bit
looking at
information.
percentage. I'm looking at percentages. He read out numbers, right? Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense.
Doesn't make any sense to me either.
It doesn't make sense, but but it explains why it doesn't make sense.
All right, so we've gone with that part of the usual business of approval of minutes, and now we're on to actions. So there are 4 of those from the previous minutes. So that first one, Andy, are you happy to talk to that first action?
First action. Yes, I've completed that. I have updated the task owner in the IG scaffold with some clarifying words around the positioning of healthcare services organisations and practitioner roles as current and future support.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And I guess while you're there, do you want to talk about the 4th one then, which was also, I think, about the scaffold?
Yes. I struggled to spell the word fax, but I did put it in there. So we have fax for communication request added. So yeah, that's now supported. I should say, if you are of an interest, there are, I did make a few changes to the scaffold since the last meeting. So if you do want to have a look through the changelog, you will see that there has been some clarifications and additions.
And just for everyone there, so this is again the scaffold branch. Where's the changelog that you were talking about, Andy?
I'm just referring to the GitHub. You can see
Okay.
the changes there. We should put a, I mean, if you're happy enough, I will actually put a new tab in to maintain a changelog in the scaffold itself, so you can just read the changes in there.
Okay. Why not?
Why not?
Danielle, can you point them out in the GitHub thing?
The changes.
Yeah.
So in the GitHub itself, and I can pop that in the chat. So that's the GitHub, and going back, I'll put that link to the scaffold in the chat.
It is at the top of the eRequesting technical design group page, isn't it? On the right, eRequesting
is.
FHIR that's correctly what we're looking at there.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's not. I don't believe. We can add a link to that, but at the moment, what's on the eRequesting technical design group page is probably master.
Yeah.
So
there,
so yeah, that's
top.
the GitHub.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
the IG itself will be master.
It's not that one there, that
Not the
continuous one.
scaffold branch, correct.
Is it worth
But we do
putting?
have links to the scaffold branch in a number of places in our discussion area.
I'll modify the Confluence page now to scaffold branch link.
It'd be nice, maybe if it's at the top. I mean, I'm sure that's fine if we say scaffold.
Yeah, we can add a separate link to it for a scaffold and probably give some words around this is the evolving design branch, I guess.
Yeah.
Daniel, if you click on that one, that last
Here.
yeah,
Click
that's
on
just I
scaffold
just created that
branch.
during the week. Basically, that's a placeholder for us to put discussions around that branch, links out to it.
Would this
Yeah.
also be where people could provide feedback? I know a lot of the time, for example, we've walked through parts of scaffold, but there's nowhere really for people to go away, look at that, and then want to say, oh, but I don't maybe agree with this cardinality, or here's a thing. Can we use this page to provide some of the feedback from that?
Yeah, I was thinking that would be a good place to do it. We can have sub pages as well if we want to have break out particular parts of the scaffold we want to have sub discussions on. General ones could go on the top page.
Maybe, Michael, you could see the conversation by complaining about something.
Yeah.
We'll have a go at it, Andy. That sounds, yep. All right, let's do that. All right. So popping back then to, let me just close that meeting chat. And I'll go back to where we were. Okay, so there's a couple of other actions. So we were on here, we've got those two, and then these other two actions for TDG. So let's talk about those. So there's one on TDG to provide feedback on the user diagrams. Can someone walk through that one for me? What does that mean? Have we put out like a request? What's going on?
That was the user diagrams that I presented last week, and the TDG was going to provide some feedback, or had the opportunity to provide some feedback on them. But they're actually not ready for proper review yet, so that can probably be parked. I'm not sure there's actually a task there.
Okay.
The task is for me to finish the user diagrams based on the feedback from last week so that we can look at them again.
And then are you happy to send out an email to the technical design group and let them know where it is and how to provide feedback?
Yes, absolutely. I just haven't got there yet.
Okay. That sounds good. And so then the one above it, TDG to work on binding of a task to a service provider as repository actions are currently undefined. Is someone happy to talk about that action item?
So I think this relates to some discussion we had around
This was to do
how,
with my discussion with David Heathcock, wasn't it? Like about what should the owner of a task be? Is that
no, I
what they?
think it was like what does assigning a task actually look like? Is it a property on the task? Is it an action of sending it to a location? What does that actually mean? But I didn't think there was actually an action that came out of that.
No, we talked. No, we
Did talk about
talked
it.
a bit of it, and I know we
Yeah.
parked some of that discussion. I don't know if this is the parking of it.
So we could consider that is going to be done through other work around defining the system actors and the work around tasks.
Yeah,
And we can close
I think
that.
the chairs probably need to come back to that one and work out how to move that one forward.
Okay.
So
All right. So we'll carry that
actually
over.
have something to consider and not just discuss it.
All right. So we'll carry that over to the next meeting then, and the chairs will come back on that either at the next meeting or the meeting after.
Sure.
Okay. So that's our normal usual business. Let's talk about updates. So the AU eRec DI, so the underlying clinical data model for eRequesting is open for comment. So that got published, I think, 2 days ago. There's a QR code for that. So that is open, and it's open for 4 weeks. So this is the opportunity to go through and provide feedback on that. And that's something that I'll have to be looking through myself. Now, we don't have a particular presentation or a detailed update on this today. I've asked Kylin to join us in our next technical design group, which is next Tuesday, to do a little bit of a walkthrough of the eRequesting data for interoperability for us. And we can also take that opportunity, I think, to ask any questions. So I think it's a really good idea if we take that time to have a first look and a review of it, and then take advantage of the fact that we'll have one of the authors at our next technical design group available to us to spend some time on that. Also related, so the AU core ballot for comment, the reconciliation for that has passed, and there's going to be a mid-June snapshot that's going to be published. The AU core technical design group has made the decisions on what's going to be in there. And what this means is that they've put together, I guess, and have a relatively stable now set of AU core profiles around patient, around practitioner role, organization, location, though I don't know if that actually affects us, allergy, intolerance, and condition. These are the FHIR profiles that are in AU core that we will be using that relate to items out of that eRequesting data for interoperability. So we're going to inherit those from AU core. And so I'm just bringing those up now to say that AU core is going to go to ballot on the 12th of August. So that kind of gives us a 6-week sort of window. Actually, yeah, about a 6-week window from when that June snapshot is published to raise any change requests if we think there's something that needs to be changed to work with eRequesting and have that actioned by the AU core group before their ballot. Andy, your hand's up.
Yes. I'd just like to, I guess, emphasize, I think, the importance of people looking at the AU CDI or AU eRequesting, if we call it, because, yes, that one, AU eRequest DI, because it is different from the material that we've seen and the discussions we've had before with the TDG. And in particular, you want to go to that next page again, Danielle. it calls out allergy intolerance and condition as part of the eRequesting DI input into this implementation guide, which implies that in supporting information, those conditions and allergy intolerances would need to leverage from AU Core. So these AU Core specifications are very important, especially when it comes to the constraints around obligations with the components of those that data. The CDG have been, from an eRequesting perspective, have been quite abstract. I mean, the elements they require are minimal, but that may not necessarily match what AU Core is assuming about the universe. So I take a particular view of that. The other one I'd like people to think about is, in particular, the sex and gender references in the stuff that's come from the CDG. It is uncontextualized to eRequesting. In fact, it doesn't mention eRequesting in what they've put down. So they've kind of pushed the problem to us to say, what is, they have said something about, we then have to figure out what in the world that means in the actual implementation context that we're talking about. So I can't encourage you enough to have a very careful look with your eRequesting glasses on to make sure that what is being requested actually makes sense for the outcome from a FHIR implementation guide we're looking to achieve. Standing off my soapbox now and handing back to you, Danielle.
Thanks, Andy. And I 100% agree. Yeah, 100% agree. Any other comments or questions on the eRequesting, data for interoperability, and the AU Core ballot? I mean, for now, we will bring these topics up again, especially again next Tuesday. So take this opportunity, please go through, read that, so that we've got some of those questions and things we want to go through next Tuesday with the authors of the eRequesting, data for interoperability there. All right, so I don't think I saw any hands up. So let's go on with additional features prioritization and then eRequesting design principles. Now, I'm happy for you to share, Andy, or for me to just click through this and scroll as you tell me to.
Let's try you clicking through this time just to do something different.
Righto.
I don't think many of these have changed. I don't think we've had any new significant changes come through. I don't know if anyone wants to raise their hand around any of these issues. I think many of them have been included in the scaffold. If you want to look at ways of supporting these, as I've said before, scaffold is just a way of expressing technically what some of these things may look like in an IG, not they will look like, but we do need to have a pretty active conversation about some of these things, like, for instance, the copy to. Do we want to continue with copy to? It is worthwhile, I think, noting that the eRequesting DI stuff has used a similar language in terms of copy to. So they look at it as here's a list of people or organizations I want this, the report to be sent to. But as we've said before, in terms of how that could potentially be supported in FHIR, there are, I guess, a few people have raised the question about, wouldn't a communication request resource be a far more appropriate and aligned way of doing that? So it would be worthwhile getting your 2 cents into that at some point. I and the scaffold have gone with the copy to extension that was put in a while ago now in to AU base. I'm becoming less attached to that as time goes by, but that's probably because I'm seeing more and more use for communication requests as a building block of defining the relationship between different eRequesting roles and the obligations that one role wants to put on another around communication. I don't know if there's any other commentary on any of these.
I don't think so, unless someone wants to raise their hand and make a comment on this. I think it is materially the same as the last time this was looked at.
If you do spot that you don't see a place where we've got a position on this in the scaffold, then do yell out and make a suggestion if you do have one. I'm happy to add them on, but at the moment I'm just kind of following my nose in terms of the scaffold and what the approaches that we can consider are, but that, as I'm trying to emphasize, is not an exclusive consideration. Do yell out if you want another one in there.
All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so let's go to the design principles. So I believe there were some changes actually made on this in the last few days, because I think I got the Confluence updates.
I did too, but I couldn't figure out what they were.
Does the person who made the updates, not that I want to call you out, you don't have to respond, want to share, I guess, some of the changes that they made? Maybe they're not on the line. Okay.
Can you not see it in Confluence? Can you not view inline comments, or does it not show the diff?
If we go to page history, we can see the difference between, I guess, the current and this one, if we want to get a bit of a diff view.
Changed by Andy Bond.
It wasn't me.
HL7 has really decided to up its, yeah. Yeah, I can see why you had problems detecting the change.
I thought Michael was just playing games with me, just trying to keep me on my toes.
I suspect this is what happens when someone like just puts their cursor on the page or something and then hits update.
Yeah.
And hasn't actually changed it.
I added AU on the top of it. That was what I changed.
Oh, on the
Because
top of where?
Yeah, it was out of place, just in the title. I remember now.
You moved the page.
Of the page?
Yeah.
So this one, this bit here.
That's all.
Aha. Okay.
Good work.
So no one won the prize for working out what that was.
I don't know. Did we vote on that change?
All right, so I guess we'll move on from an update from design principles then, because we now know what the update was. I don't think we need to talk about it further. I get it.
Should it be capital AU?
No, it should. Please don't start that. Alette does that with me, and no. I mean, yes, it will be capital A, capital U, because it's an ISO 3166
I'm only kidding,
code.
Daniel. I'm only kidding.
It's an official.
Yeah, obviously you've
We
accidentally
need to decide
landed
whether
on
we're going to do a
landmine.
2-letter or a 3-letter acronym. Though.
Oh, just don't. Yeah.
Did I break the link by doing that?
Yeah, but that's fine. People will be able to work it out. Because when you click on it, it'll say maybe you meant this other page. See? It'll give them the page that it needs to be. So this is fine. We can just update the slides next time. Let's move on to the substantive topic for today, which is on specimens. So this one we're going to go through now and go through specimen, and we're going to go through, and I'm going to hand over to Brett now to lead and facilitate that discussion. And ideally, we're actually going to not just walk through these items today, but we are also going to be making decisions and coming to agreement. So we'll be going through again with a motion and a second, wherever we have a general majority within the group. So I'll hand over to Brett now. I'm happy for you to share, but also you can just tell me next slide or something when you want me to move.
Yeah, I might share it at some point to show the specs, but just yeah, we'll just hang on here. So initially I was just going to confirm use cases and the data model mappings that have been done already, and I think it would be good because we probably need to clearly state the requirement for this, because I think it's not entirely clear, and then also into just the detail of what's in the current scaffold and some more specifics around that. We'll get onto that. So just initially, I'll just bring up the use cases that have been referred to. If I can find the share screen button. There we go. Oh, sorry, Danielle, you'll have to stop sharing. Thanks. Get this one up. Beautiful. So hopefully you can see use cases.
Yes.
Cool. So so in the mappings, the use cases that I mentioned are the general cases for pathology. On a request, and so the P01 and P10 are the ones that are referenced. And I think primarily the initial question is really, and this is just confirming what we probably already know, is confirming this is only for pathology. So that's correct. No objections.
So I guess Brett has tabled the question there. So
yeah,
the comment for the technical design group, noting that diagnostic request is only in scope here for pathology and diagnostic imaging. Is there any expectation of use of specimen in requesting for diagnostic imaging? I'll just pause for question or comment, and if not, we will take that as a no to be confirmed.
Didn't that come from the TDG?
So just a quick question here. Does diagnostic imaging include digital pathology, histology imaging?
I would say no.
No.
It's I can see the ball barrier you're dividing there, but
No, I'm not trying to make an issue. I just it's really how you draw the line, and I would probably put that in a pathology case, but I just want to check that that's a consensus.
Yeah, I would treat digital histology as just pathology. Like the sample is still, we get a sample, we might chop that up into bits and scan it with digital imaging, but that's not radiology. It's not the diagnostic imaging field, in my view. It's a pathology request, and it would have a sample. It's
it'll just end up in the PACS, and
it may end up in a PACS, but from a requesting point of view, you're not going to request for your histology sample at a diagnostic imaging clinic, because now we're going to put it in a PACS. You know, we might put it in a PACS, but that doesn't mean the modality changed over to radiology. It's still a pathology field.
Thanks, Angus. David?
I may not have been paying attention to this, but something that we've been seeing quite a lot of recently in our discussions with public pathology, the referred tests. can we manage referred tests within these existing use cases that we've got, or do we need something different? I know it's really late in the game. Just wanted to double check that we can cover this.
Did you want
So
to leave
test is
that
being
to?
referred-
Sorry, David. I think that's not related. Is that about specimen specific, or are you raising in a meeting topic, a separate one?
Oh, sorry. No, we just had the use cases in front of us, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to,
if you need to raise this at a later point, I'll deal with that later.
Okay, if we have time, we'll come back to that at the end of this meeting. And if not, I think we're happy to end that. Like at the end of this, we'll go through what the agenda for the next meeting is and what else we want to add in. And we can certainly add that topic in there. So I think we've confirmed that. I think we have answered that question then, Brett. That is confirmed specimens of interest within the pathology case and
Cool.
only the pathology case.
Yeah, excellent. And so it's, you know, in these cases, there's no explicit reference to specimens that I can see, other than specimen type in P10. But I guess that might be part of the actual request itself. So I guess the question is like just to flesh out the use case as to why we would have specimen details included in a request. So I think is one case just a specimen is taken as for a request. You know, essentially, you know, a GP takes it, or a it may be a hospital request where the specimen is taken as part of requesting. Is that the case we're covering?
We've got two hands up, Brett.
Yeah, I see. I don't know who was first. I
Rob.
saw Rob first. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Look, I'm not sure whether this is where you want to cover off on this, and it's not perhaps in these use cases, but it's still with regards to collection of specimens, and whether it's a sputum or a swab or a urine in microbiological collections, these are often self-collected by a patient, and particularly now we've got self-collection of cervical screening tests. So I don't know whether that's what you're talking about here, that notate what sort of specimen it is, other than these use cases, which are blood specimens taken by pathology collectors. You know, I'm just sort of throwing that out there. I'm not sure whether that's been covered off.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we'll get our pathology crew to answer that one. Andy, I saw you next.
Yeah, I don't know whether I was hallucinating that specimen was originally something that the CDG was talking about, but I find it quite weird that it's now gone dead silent on the whole notion of specimens and that there is any need to even look at this. And it kind of, you know, I guess, raises an existential question about what the TDG is and should be incorporating that is independent of the CDG for something that one imagines is a pretty foundational clinical need.
Yeah, I hear that.
Maybe it's
a
for next week or next meeting where we have them talking about it. But I don't know. I think we run the risk of not having a foundation for this other than something we invent.
Yes, and I think, you know, I think that was part of the questions I had on the use cases of whether this was actually a clinical set of information that was needed to service the request, or was this part of essentially the administrative requirement to service the request, and which, you know, and I think, you know, clarifying that would be helpful. Angus, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just wanted to. The reason I think it's sort of feels odd that it's not there. Like I think everyone's like, my God, pathology always uses specimens. Why are we not talking about specimens in requesting? I think because a lot of it today is when we register it into the laboratory system, when you arrive at a collection center, we are provided the samples. Now that might be because we stick a needle in them when we create them, or that might be because they walk in with a bag with a urine in it. Or in the other aspect, that might be because the doctor collected it and it's delivered. We come and pick it up from the surgery, and there's a bag with a urine jar and a swab and a pathology request form in it. So I'm not saying it's the perfect world, but it tends to be we're not specifically asking for specimen information in the request because we're dealing with the reality of the specimens that are delivered to us with the request. You know, like we don't do a sort of cross check that says the request said do a EDTA sample, or more probably in the reality a urine. We don't really cross check someone telling us to do a urine sample with having a urine sample in the jar. We more say there are these tests to be done. Like the ordered item is a MSU MCNS, and then our staff know that to do that test we need a urine, right? And in a lot of those tests is really simple. Like, you know, doctors obviously you need to do a urine. We need a urine, and if they're doing a wound swab, they will do the wound swab in the room because they know what to do. But of course, in those blood ones, there's a lot of knowledge in like what tube for what test. And so I don't think we ever seek to be told by the request what the samples should be or are. We receive the samples and we have a lot of knowledge of what we require, and we have what we have. We have what was given to us, you know, in the bag or that we collect. And I'm not saying that's great answers here, but it's kind of why specimen's not front and center, because it's kind of our job at the front door of the lab to register the specimens we receive, and we know what specimens we want. Where that's different is probably collection date. Where the big gap is collection date on samples done by the doctor. So if he takes a swab, we need to know when he took it, and we know that he took a swab because we eventually have the swab, the physical sample. But the fallback too is that people always write collection dates on the samples, right? Like it would be wrong process to give us a sample that does not have the patient's name, date of birth, sex, and collection date on it. So again, requiring the request to have an object that says he wants a wound swab done, and here is an object about the sample that was collected at this date and time and is a swab sample. I'm not dismissing it, but we kind of get past that today because we just fall back on the fact that in the bag we have a swab, and if I look at it, it has a collection date on it and it has a name, date of birth, and sex, which I must have to align it to the request. So it's kind of why we're in this situation. I don't know where we go forward, but
So could I just ask some workflow questions then, in how you see this information working? Because we've got a specimen referenced out of a request. So if a doc makes a request, there is no specimen yet. You're essentially going to head down to the collection center and it's going to happen. Is there an expectation that the specimen details would be then forming part of that request, or do you think that that's another piece of information?
There's also about scope here, right? If you're in a hospital, their ordering systems, let's say a Cerner or an Epic, they're very, what's the word? I don't want to use the word complicated. They're a high level of integration, right? So they have now a whole lot of logic built into them because they're servicing one lab in a hospital, tend to be. So that system now knows that when you order this test, it has tables that it looks up and says, to do that test, you need this sample, right? And therefore, in that case, the order sort of has all this rich sample information. And but that's a question of scope, right? Because when you get out into the private world, GPs, best practice medical director, they do not have all that logic in them. And I don't think anyone's proposing that they start having that logic in them. So the use case in a hospital around samples in ordering is far at a higher level than private, community ordering. Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question, Brett.
No, yeah. So I'm just thinking that so if a service requests were created in a GP setting, you wouldn't have any specimen details.
The main one's collection date, and I'll also say that collection date.
Well, you only know when that's collected, right?
Yeah, and it tends to be in all the systems I've seen. It's not per sample, even though we know it's per sample.
Yeah.
When you talk in a pathology system, it's per episode, and I know some systems split and have multiple episodes. So OSLab at Queensland Health, if you send them a full blood count and MSU, they will create 2 pathology episodes, one for the MSU, one per sample type, effectively, one for the MSU, one for the full blood count or blood tests. Where at Sonic, we put that all on one request, and we kind of just say there is one collection date for the whole request. And if it's another collection date, then that's another request happening some other time.
Yep. So from your perspective, though, is the request made when the GP makes the request and hands the paper to the patient? Or is the request made when the collection is taken?
So from a Medicare billing, it's from when the doctor wrote the request.
Yep.
I guess when is so it's a hard question to answer. Like for us, it's sort of not concrete until it's created as an episode in our laboratory system. But once you're at that stage, you're beyond the request, in my view.
Yep. Yeah. I'm just trying to clarify when this information gets populated in the request, or does it get populated? Does it turn, if say it's a GP request and there's no specimen until it's collected, and then you rock up to the collection point, is now that just lab business?
Yeah, when we register the request in our laboratory system and create a pathology episode in our system, that's when we record, at least at Sonic, we record the specimen types, an EG or MSU, specimen details like fasting, but it's not received for us today. It's not received electronically. It's entered by our collection staff or our lab staff on receiving the bag and samples, with the request.
Yeah. So do you see in this world there would be any updates to the request to include collection date? Or do you think that's just not part of the scope of what gets recorded?
I'm not sure. I'm sort of living as phase we don't do it today. Do we need to do it? Yeah. I might let some others talk too, Brett. There's hands up.
Yeah, that's good.
Matt, I was just going to add to Angus. I think I agree that there's not a lot of cases where I would expect a specimen for pathology. Probably the one that jumped out to me with chemistry hat on would be like atypical fluid specimens, and you want to say that it was this rather than have all that preloaded. That might apply to all the anatomical pathology as well. If you want to say some information about it was a polyp or what sort of lesion you might have excised or something like that. But for the majority of, like, especially routine tests, I wouldn't expect a specimen. I saw Nisha put in the comments about prerequisites, and almost like some of those maybe like pre, post, trough, peak, all that sort of stuff. I wonder whether that is just also usually loaded within the test. You want a peak gentamicin or something like that.
Yeah. We put this stuff today in clinical notes, don't we? Like,
yeah.
Probably poorly. Like, so really good examples. And they were the examples that I think Heather Graham brought up early that sort of started the specimen discussion was the histo sample, right? So someone's cut off 2 moles and he wants to say on the request or say somehow that this was the left arm one, that was the right arm one.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. You want to be precise if you've got a few specimens, because if one of them comes back with something, you want to know which thing you've got to do some more action on if the margins were right.
Yeah, but a lot of that is difficult in itself because it's kind of describing this is that one, that's the other one. You know, you could start having structure and saying arm left, but it kind of gets a bit more detailed than that, a bit more nuanced. And the other one you mentioned was the peaks and troughs, like you're doing a glucose tolerance test. You're sort of talking about it started and we took the first sample and we took another sample an hour later and then they drank a glucose bottle and we took another sample. You know, it's sort of creates a complex process of it. And again, it's just sort of facilitated through clinical notes. And they're two, you know, swabs as well, describing where the swab came from.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take that on board too. Kathleen, did you want to add to this?
Yeah, sure. So I think I understand what you're talking about from the workflow, etc. But if this is about also the sharing of information, there may be times where there is no specimen that they actually send them to somewhere to get the specimen. So therefore, we have to look at it more from if a GP is requesting something to happen and it hasn't happened, then this would be required and they'd go somewhere and then the specimen required or whatever, what the next step would then happen. So it's sort of two different things. And I still think if you use the same logic, even if it has a specimen going with it to be delivered, it just means it's a consistency of process. For the person getting into the lab, they still continue their process. But if we get to a point where some things, I think if we don't just look at it from a lab perspective, we look at it from someone turning up to go and get that specimen, whatever that may be in however format, and then the lab is a separate issue.
Yeah.
So how I'm struggling with that view. So if we sort of take the 80-20 approach, that 80% of what is requested from pathology is probably a blood tube being collected by a collection centre, roughly. Are you saying then that all requests for a full blood count, liver functions, you know, some other strange thing needs to then state the samples? If it's all or nothing, then I struggle with that. Like, I feel like it can't be all. It could be nothing, but if we're going to do all, that's going to be really hard.
But isn't it two processes? One is the requesting process, which is this is what I want. This is the type of test or sample that I want to happen. And then the other one is the sample's already happened and it's gone off to be processed. So there's like two different things here.
They're two different processes. Like there's the process of ordering. I'm sitting at a desk and I'm going to choose these tests. And then there's the process of collecting the sample. And that collecting the sample might be still the doctor. Like he sat at his desk and he said, I'm going to order a wound swab. And then he stands up and he literally takes the wound swab from you. And then there's a scenario where he says, I'm going to order liver functions blood tests. And then he just gives you a form and you go to a collection center and they're collected for you. And then, so there's those two hybrid work. And you're right that there's the act of ordering something and then there's the act of collecting against it. And sometimes the doctor plays the lab's role in doing the collection. And it's those ones where we're possibly need a specimen record because now the lab isn't recording what they did. We're trying to get from the doctor what did you do?
But the description for this is for a request. That's where I'm going back to. The description of what we're looking at is for a request, not for the doing. And that's why I'm saying what I'm saying.
I guess it's because it's that was really my question. Is this only in the case where a collection is made on the request, and so essentially it goes with the request, and there's a good question as to why do we need this information and electronically if it's going to be delivered to a collection center? And
I guess
other processes.
one view why some people might, why some systems may want it, is the hospital sort of epic Cerner scenario, right? Because now the process is not requesting and lab collecting. It's the request is created, the Cerner system calculates what needs to be collected, and then places that order into a collection round to like a nurse on a ward, almost, telling her everything, like go collect these samples from these patients, and then they get bagged and go to the lab, as opposed to, so the order is kind of going from ordering system to collection system to lab, not ordering system to lab. And but then are we covering that use case? Is that the use case where, what is our scope?
So it might actually be easier if we move off the really vague use case and into what was actually proposed or raised by the CDG on what they thought we might want to think about, which is a roundabout way of saying that when the CDG did raise it, and they did, or at the very first kind of meetings we had, and in the slides, and you can see that on the data model mappings page, where the presentation that was presented to both groups was of a data model, and it was split between, if you scroll up, because there's the images that originally drove this. I mean, they've changed over time, but it's still true in the CDG. So keep going up, images.
Images?
Yeah, like you need to go to the top of the page, not the bottom of the page. Here we go.
Okay.
So what was being presented at the CDG, you can see where they've proposed a number of items for us to deal with in specimen. And when you look in the pathology request, I know it's all grayed out, that top line is their scope. The bottom is us, and specimen is in there, where the CDG has identified items that they have said, this kind of thing is the kind of thing that we think that you guys will consider, and we leave that entirely to the technical design group to consider what is relevant from a FHIR IG perspective in R1. You can also see that if you go up again, there's another image which people are probably, that big star one. In pathology request, there's again specimen on the right, and it's got those stars that indicate all the specimen things are ones they tagged. These are the ones that we might want to consider. So that's where all of that has come from, to come to the technical design group to consider, is this still something that's relevant and relevant in an R1 scope? Which ones are we missing anything? Do we even need to capture this, and how will we address it? So that's where we are today. We're picking up this item now and going, is this something that is relevant, and in which cases?
Yeah, and also, like at the moment too, the eReqDI has no references to specimen, which is indicated also from that diagram. It's pretty much, how is this servicing the workflow? I better let Dan. Dan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to confirm that from a public perspective, and as Angus has alluded to, from a hospital integration setting, we do want to have the specimen information along with the order.
Yeah. So, and I think the question is, like at the moment, that's, there's processes where that's collected, and so I guess it's the question of, is that part of the requesting process, if it's attached to a request? And Daniel?
Yeah, I guess what you just said, it really depends on where you're drawing the line. So to me, it's very clear that there is a need in quite a few cases for information regarding the specimen to be sent from the source, be it a hospital or a specialist. So in the case of histology, breast cancer operation, there's going to be potentially lymph nodes, there's going to be potential different pieces of tissue. It's very important that the pathologist who's doing, and the decisions around the staining are made according to knowing what particular tissue is involved. So there's a critical importance of specimen information being transferred but does that form part of the requesting process? I don't have a position on that. That's a decision we need to make.
Cool. Yeah. So I think that's a good reason to have it, and it's obviously, yeah, it is that question, I guess, to say, is that part of the electronic request, or is that handled through some other mechanism, right? And I think that's probably the biggest question as to whether we need to have this in an R1 or not, right? And so I think I might just leave us there on use cases because I've ballooned through a bunch of time. So yeah, so basically going on to like,
I mean, just to confirm for time, you have 23 minutes left to go.
Okay. All right, that's all right. We'll get on to the detail. So I really wanted to go through that workflow question though, because I think it's the question about when it's populated and, you know, in what condition it wouldn't be populated is probably important. And we probably need to spell that out in the IG in terms of the workflow about when it's expected. Why would this be filled in? You know, at what points in the workflow would this data be relevant? So yeah, looking at the elements that were identified in the mapping, essentially there's the specimen itself. So that's basically related to collection of a specimen, who collected it, a collector, the collection date, time, which is important to know, and a container identifier, which is essentially a referenceable identifier for the container, which is links the actual specimen to a piece of information, and details about the body site the specimen is taken from. So from essentially that's the general FHIR mapping. I don't think there's too much dispute on any of this material, but let me know if there is. And going into what's in the scaffold right now. So basically those mappings are covered here. We've got our service request, and you can see specimen is part of a request. So yes, essentially it needs to be populated or updated as part of a service request entry. The actual specimen itself is oh no, hang on, let me get a specimen. So yeah, the specimen itself is, I'm in the wrong spec. One sec, let's get to your request specimen. Here we go. So this is covering off those mappings. So we do have collection details in terms of a reference to a individual who is the collector. So a practitioner role, which is a practitioner, so they'll be the collector of the specimen. We do have the date, time of the collection, a body site indicated, and the container identity as part of the content. So I think I just wanted to go back actually to the service request. I just wanted to confirm that the cardinality on this specimen's in a request. So I'm just confirming that there are multiple specimens possible on a request. Makes sense?
So Brett, you've asked the question.
Yeah, I have asked the
You're
question.
asking the technical design group to confirm if it's possible for multiple specimens to be associated with a single test. Are you asking that in the context of an individual test or just in general?
Well, this is essentially going to be an individual test, correct? So there'll be one service requested.
So it's difficult. This is the difficulty of stepping into specimens in requesting. So a lot of those systems, American systems that do it, flip this around a bit and they say, I have a specimen, what tests am I doing on it? Not I've ordered a test, what specimen will I do it on? They kind of go the other way.
Yeah.
Because a test is typically only done on one specimen, but other tests are done on that same specimen.
Yeah.
And some tests do have multiple specimens, like a GTT is like there'll be multiple citrate tubes for the one test. So I guess it's many to many, and
So here in this direction, then there is a case to have multiple specimens attached to a single.
It's rare, but it happens. Yeah.
Okay. So that's good. We shouldn't even consider restricting that.
Are we asking for a decision on that at this point, or will we leave decisions to inside the specimen material itself? Shall we?
Oh, let's ask the question.
Okay.
Because because that would be good just to confirm. Because obviously, if there's any case that's true, we have to leave this as multiple, right?
Oh, I agree. That seems the case. We've opened that up for comment. Andy's raised his hand.
Andy, yeah. Andy.
There's also a link from a specimen to a service request.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, true. And that's more like what Angus just spoke about. Yep.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions around whether it's meaningful for a service request to have more than one specimen in some circumstances?
Two hands up.
Yep, there is. I think, Andy, do you still have your hand up on that topic, or have you not popped that down?
No, I haven't unraised.
Okay. All right, Daniel.
Yeah, just repeating what I mentioned before about the histopathology testing. Quite normal to have a single, what we would have called an order back in HL72X day with multiple specimens. So different, as I mentioned, the breast cancer case, you've got fatty tissue, you've got lymph node tissue. They all will relate to the same request for diagnosis.
Okay, that all seems to me to say that we have a consensus really in the group that that's possible. So in that case, I think we can actually move to agree that in a decision. Does someone want a motion that we accept this optional 0 to many kind of cardinality in association with a service requested specimen? Someone happy to motion?
I can.
Thanks, Celia. Does someone want to second that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Daniel here.
Thanks, Daniel. So I'll ask people then to put their hand up if they're going to choose to abstain on participating in this decision. And you'll use the Zoom reactions hands. Okay, we've got one abstention. You can drop your hand now. Okay, and then I'll ask people if they want to vote negative, as in you don't agree that it's possible to have multiple, or that you don't agree that it's possible that sometimes you won't have a specimen, then raise your hand. Okay, there are no negatives, so that motion is passed. We'll take the numbers later on. At the moment, there's 42 people in here, but I think there might also be an AI. So this will either be 41 positive or maybe 40 positive. I'll double check the attendees later. Thanks.
Excellent. Cool. And so I think with the data mappings that we have, so I just wanted to
I don't know if collection date and time can be mandatory. Is what worries me.
Yep.
And my view is if you're ordering, and you're saying this order needs an MSU, it doesn't mean you have one yet.
Can we actually just go back and let's confirm that? Like, what does it mean for specimen? Because in the case, I guess, that Kathleen had raised, we had that talk about is this the thing you're ordering, or is this the collections that come across with the order? So if you could just navigate to the service request, Brett, and we can just confirm what that data element means.
So specimen.
I think you might have to go to snapshot to see the definition.
Oh yeah, cool. Here we go. Oh yeah, I can just get it from here. Where is specimen? I've gone past it.
You're in specimen
I'm in
already,
specimen.
so you're looking
Hang
for
on.
the service request.
Yeah, let me. Oh, I go snapshot.
Yeah, snapshot.
Yeah.
So we can just confirm for the group about what that element means.
Yeah. So we have our definition.
Is requested on already existing specimens. And the request points to the specimens to applies to. First with the unknown specimen resource points to this.
I believe this implies that the specimen has been collected.
What about that last sentence? If the request is entered first with an unknown specimen, then the specimen resource points to the service request?
Yeah, because the specimen is created after the service request.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is saying that it never exists without the physical specimen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. It's not what you're ordering, it's what you're associating with a collected item.
Dan Orrod, who mentioned definitely need this in a hospital. Is that the understanding of the use case in a hospital?
That's my very limited understanding. I was actually trying to consult with another colleague about this topic over chat while we were talking about it. So
yeah,
she just advised that as part of receiving an e-order, we would, in the hospital, we would accept the specimen as well.
Yeah. So it's essentially, that's a specimen-driven request, right? You have a request that's attached to the specimen, as opposed to
as opposed to the request instructing someone what specimen is required for it. It's a truth thing. It's I have this specimen. If I don't have the specimen, I can't talk about it.
Yeah, we have mechanisms of guiding what specimens are required for a test.
So with 136 in the comments, it says many diagnostic procedures need a specimen, but the request itself is not actually about the specimen.
This is not the specimen specification, simply saying that in creating the service request, where there is a link to a specimen that exists, you make that link. I guess the question is, are we looking to allow both a specimen-driven and a service request-driven representation of the information? Because this is kind of implying if you have the specimen, then and it's labeled and you've got it, now you can link the service request to it. Or if you create the service request and then you do the specimen collection afterwards, and now you've got a representation of that specimen, can you just reverse link it back to the service request? And the lab should be able to deal with both directions and both reference directions? Or are we just going to say, no, you've got to have the specimen first and then you do the service request? We'll only support the one way.
I guess another saying is, when are we trying to deal with requesting specimen collection, or are we just trying to deal with the presence of a sample in response? Are we instructing a system, you need to go collect these samples? Like that's what I fear some hospital systems are doing, using messaging for, like, tell the collection system for this request, go collect this urine, which this doesn't service, as opposed to the paradigm of it's not telling someone to collect a sample. The sample exists. I'm requesting something, and in that request, I'm recording that I have this sample. And I'm not telling someone to do it. And I think the latter makes sense. Would be great to have a Cerner Epic sort of person to say, is that their understanding as well?
I think we have them on the line, but
Yeah.
David's got his hand up
David,
first,
yeah.
and then we'll see if someone from Epic or Cerner who's on the line is happy to comment.
Yeah, all I was going to say was I think I am thinking about this the same way that Angus is, in the sense that I think what we're actually thinking about is information that's covered in what I used to refer to as the test collection manual. So, in other words, that's a document that collectors would refer to when they receive a request. And, the request will have written on it the tests, and then the manual tells them what samples they need to collect from the patient, whether it's, what number of tubes and what type of tubes they need to collect, or whether it's a urine, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a translation that goes on, but I don't know whether I don't know enough about pathology to know whether that information is dependent on the equipment that's in the lab. Do you know what I mean? So it might be that to do the test at Sonic Healthcare, we need to collect 2 tubes of blood, but to do exactly the same test, a different lab, it needs 3, or it only needs 1, or it needs an EDTA, or I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's system driven rather than it being inherent to the test.
And I confirm 100%. It is as you said, the latter. Like Sonic will want different tubes to Helios to do the same test. The what samples to collect are very lab centric. Not always, of course. A urine is a urine, but there's nuance to it, and yet that's different in a closed environment like a hospital. So if you got like a hospital, like Queensland Health, they're running a hospital. They have Queensland pathology, right? The hospital doesn't send any. All their work goes to Queensland pathology, and therefore they bake into their Cerner EMR system the logic that Queensland pathology wants. So when they order this, Queensland pathology says collect that tube, and they would run into problems if they, on their margins, if they sent that to Sonic, because we might go, no, that's not the tube we want for this. We want a different type of tube, and that's where we're trying to, like, I'm struggling a bit with our scope for the spec we're building. Are we trying to service in-hospital ordering and a Cerner and an Epic system, or are we trying to service, community sort of multi-lab ordering?
I just want to move to, because Andrew has had his hand up in response to us asking for a comment from someone from Epic. So I'll just let Andrew comment.
Yeah, so in terms of, to your earlier point, Angus, of would we want to use something like the specimen information to communicate, is this a specimen that's coming with the test, or is this the specimen that's actually collected? I think we agree with you that the lab side is the one doing the collection, and it represents what the lab determines is needed. In the hospital, setting where you have those tighter integrations where you may split up or assign the responsibility for determining collection sooner in the workflow, I would expect that to be something that is a secondary use case, as the overall focus of eRequesting is that kind of inter-organization, community-based piece. It would be something that's nice to be able to have as a option to say, if in a hospital setting you do decide, you as an organization, whatever the implementing organization is, decides to move the specimen collection kind of task and logic to the EMR or up to more of the clinical front end users as opposed to the lab staff, there is a space for that, because as you said, certain things like urine and certain blood vials can be done by clinical staff at the point of care, and it is the local organization and laboratory that's dictating those terms and what they need for different tests, but they will, in the kind of broader ecosystem, provide within that organization the rules and guidance for example, to say the lab of this hospital system says you need these tubes for these tests, and in a product like Epic or Cerner, we do have that space to build that out according to whatever that close, tightly integrated lab is. For the broader goal of the TDG of eRequesting, where it is more of that interorganizational community focus, I do think that the specimen is something that is secondary to the order. You are placing an order for this test, and then the specimen is something that arises when it actually goes to be collected by the lab. So,
thanks, Andrew. We're coming up to time, so I'm going to have to tie box the rest of this conversation to just like another 2-3 minutes. So, Michael, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'll just be really quick. I think the definition of the service request specimen here is quite clear, and that it is about an already existing specimen. So the usage here on service request is I already have the specimen and I'm referencing it from the service request. So any other case other than that, it's not appropriate. It's the specimen gets taken later, then the specimen actually references the request the other way around. So I think that's the only usage we're talking about for this particular element.
I agree. I think we've covered it. I think it represents the specimen that exists.
Yeah, cool. So I'm going to do this pretty briefly, but I did want to just point out there was a draft of AU Core for specimen. So this is a draft for AU Core. It's not in the current AU Core scope for R1, but may well be in R2, but it'll probably be driven a lot by eRequesting in terms of what it is. And you can see the scope is a little larger in terms of some extra elements have been included. So I do think it's worth having a review of that to see, see what is relevant there. It does sort of also cover that reverse linkage back to service request in a general sense, and also some interesting things like perhaps fasting status as part of the collection details. So this is not what was it wasn't a patient instruction to fast or a test service type with fasting. It was actually, did the patient fast for the collection, and whether that's something that is collected or not. So all about the collection. So I'll probably just leave that part there. But something we probably will need to get into is the body site terminology and thinking about how specific we want to be in terms of the body site coding and the terminology usage there. Because obviously if that's a well-known established set, that would be very helpful, I think, for people in general.
So can we just so to wrap this up, so what we'll be doing is we'll talk about the agenda and confirm, but I believe we'll continue the specimen conversation in the next meeting to get to the decisions. What are you requesting that people do in between?
Actually, I want to actually put something to people that to have to think about for next time, is that I have a serious question about whether we need to have specimen on request at all, and whether there's an identifiable need to include that. So I think it's more, are there existing processes that already cover the collection details that do not, so we don't need to exchange those because they'll be part of a regular collection process, or a specimen provision to a collector, as part of the business. So I would really ask people to have a think about that, because I think there's a chance we could put this out of scope, and especially for R1.
Okay, so you're going to be proposing for our next meeting that in fact that specimen is not in scope of R1, and we'll go forwards and try to make that decision. Okay, will you be writing a reason, a justification on that? We can then send that out.
I'll write one, but I really need a pathologist to weigh in as to whether I've missed the mark somewhere, because
Can I then ask for volunteers to help Brett write that, or to sense check what Brett is proposing around that scope? Okay, we've got a hand up from Dan.
Yeah, get in touch with me too, Brett. It's Matt.
Matt Cordell.
Dan, Matt, and then
Angus.
Angus. Yeah, Angus. Perfect.
All right, great. Go forwards with that then. Thanks, everyone. We'll make that the action.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Also, good discussion.
And I'll share my screen again. And just to wrap up, I hope if we could get out on time, we'll become close. Let me just share my screen again. I think everyone can see that. So what we're talking about next meeting. So our next meeting is the 28th. So that's Tuesday. So that's pretty soon. Now that we're doing these weekly meetings on the 28th. If anyone has any objections to us holding that meeting on the 28th, pop your hand up now. We still have the continuing going through this weekly cadence, which seems to be working so far. We'll recheck again on the 6th of June if we want to commit to these meetings. And what our 28th of May agenda looks like is we've got Kylie coming up on the eRequesting data for interoperability. So again, that's that call out. Remember, we talked about that. It's out now. So please have a look at that. Brett's going to put together a proposal around specimen to, I think, in fact, not include it in R1. And we've got a number of people who will help sense check that. It'll come out for our decision to make that in our next TDG. And then I think we're going to come back to the discussion on eRequesting actors and also withdrawal of MHR consent. So at this point, I would like to ask what else? Assuming we have time, and I don't know if we will, because it is a 90-minute meeting and we seem to get, a lot of good discussion going. Are there any other topics that people would like to raise for our next meeting? Angus?
I don't know if it has to be the next meeting, but start chipping away at what the order identifier is going to be, like the barcode, like just start talking about that. It's not as simple as, is it a GUID, or because of the legacy stuff we do today. So just starting to talk about what is the primary identifier that people would be scanning and to find a request.
Do you have a suggested meeting for that? Oh, David, your hand is up. Is that on identifiers or a separate topic?
Separate topic, just about the transfer, as I mentioned earlier, transfer of orders between labs, and whether our current use cases support them, or we need to think more deeply about that.
Okay. Could you pop that in an email for me so we can put the topic on there and have you phrase that in the meeting? All right, so we'll confirm when we want to do that, but I think we had talked about barcodes, so maybe that's the 6th of June or maybe that's the 11th of June when we start having that topic then. Okay, any other comments or questions before we bring the meeting to a close? All right, thanks everyone. We are actually on time.
Thanks, Daniel.
Discussion. See you on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you, Daniel.
Well done. Cheers.
Yeah.